Uh, my name is Lee Statom. I was born in 1925, December 4th, at the Upland, California Hospital, Community Hospital, and lived in Alta Loma, which is about 5 miles from Upland, for the first, about 18 years of my life. At that point, I went into the U.S. Navy, got out just after my 19th birthday, and so I spent my 18th and 19th years in the Navy, and then returned to Alta Loma and lived there for another 3 years or so while I went to Chaffee College, which was a community college at that time, still is. And then I went a year to the University of Loyola in Los Angeles. And then I went to 3 years at University of California, Santa Barbara.
Yeah, what are your earliest memories of Alta Loma and growing up there?
And remember, your dad was 54 years old when you were born. You mentioned that too.
Well, growing up in Alta Loma was interesting. Alta Loma is a very small town. My graduating class from the 8th grade, that was in 1939, right? That was, I think, 34 students.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe a few less. That was at Alta Loma Elementary School, and the school was right practically next to me in location.
What do you remember from that school?
I remember some of the classrooms, some of the teachers I had, some of the students I had, or some of the students I was with at that time, not now. And some interesting incidents that happened once in a while. One of these was my sister, who I haven't mentioned yet, was a child of my dad and his former wife, who had been dead for several years when he married my mother. And my sister was 20 years or so older than I was. And she had gone to Pomona College in Claremont. And when she was there at Pomona, she was majored in physical education. So she was a kind of a coach.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that.
she was a tennis coach there at Pomona. I guess that was kind of during her time she was studying there. I'm not sure about that. But I would say you'd have to ask her, but she's been dead for years. And
And what was her name?
Alice Statom, of course. And then just before she and her significant other were married, just before he died, he had been also a student at Pomona College, played football, and developed cancer. And I'm not just sure what kind of cancer he had or anything, but he was dying. And so they decided to get married. So a week before he died, they were married. Now, the reason I mentioned this is, why?
Because you were gonna say what her name was.
Her name then became Alice Hesmelhalch. And let's see if you can Google that name.
And she was a teacher.
And she had become then an algebra teacher at Chaffey High School in Ontario. And that's where I went to high school after I got through with Altaloma Elementary.
And she was known then as Hezzy, or did that come later?
It was after
She
she
had a
got
kind of
married,
nit-
so,
She had a kind of nickname, Hezzy. And,
Because that's all we ever called her was Hezzy,
yeah,
right?
and that's all most of the students called her too at Chaffey.
Did they?
Yeah.
what kind of car did she always have?
She usually had a convertible. And, let's see. What else?
How about the T-Bird then that she bought in her later years, that we still have?
That was also convertible.
Yeah, yeah.
And you were going to tell about the story when you brought that up, that you were playing her, an instrument of hers in
Banjo.
elementary school?
She had picked up playing the banjo while she was going to college, I guess, or maybe in high school, I don't remember when, because I wasn't around at that time. And showed me a few chords when I said started school. And I think I was in about the third grade, where our third grade class was asked to give demonstrations to the kindergartners. Now the kindergarten, that was the early kindergarten, and it was located in the basement of Altaloma Elementary. And down there amid the big pillars, cement pillars and so forth, they had the kindergarten class. And I had been listening on the radio, which we didn't, of course, have any television or any kind of modern electronic equipment, except the radio. That's where I had been listening to a program called Stuart Hamblin's Hour. And Stuart Hamblin was a country western star at the time, and he broadcasted from Los Angeles, and it's a big deal. And he was advertised as being at the Potalower Motor Company, 1933 South Figueroa. And tell him Stuart Hamblin sent you down. Anyhow, she showed me a few chords on the banjo, and I'd been listening to Stuart Hamblin, and we went down to the kindergarten room down there in the basement, and she said, well, play something. So I presented a song that I had heard on Stuart Hamblin's show, and it was called I've Got No Use for the Women. And I don't have a banjo here. So
Was that a hit for you then? Were they everybody?
well, was it? I don't know.
I should think everybody would have been laughing to see this young kid sing.
Yeah, I knew a little third grader piping along, playing chords on the banjo. I knew 1, 4, and 5 chords, I guess, key of G or something. And it went something like this. Now I've got no use for the women. A true one can seldom be found. They'll use a man for his money. When it's gone, they'll turn him down. And that was the beginning to the song.
And was that kind of your start in music then? Was the banjo?
Yeah, I think so.
Wow. But then when you got, later on, you moved on to the piano, right?
When I was in high school, I used to go to the dances in Ontario at the Legion Hall on Friday nights. And I remember the band that was playing there at the time was a guy named Earl Ferguson, and he was from Pomona. Pomona is a town about well, it was bigger than Ontario at that time. Ontario was, I think, 10,000 residents, and I'd say Pomona was about 15,000. And Pomona was west of Ontario about 10 miles. And the band that was playing there was Earl Ferguson and his band down there at the Legion Hall in Ontario. And I can remember the trombone player that was in the band, Clinton Reed. I can still remember his name, man. He would sit there sometimes during breaks, put his trombone down and play some stuff on the piano. And I thought, boy, I wish I could do that. I remember that like it was yesterday.
Hmm.
And I can still see Clinton sitting down there going chung, ching, chung, ching, chording it out. So I wish I could do that. So I started like banging around.
Did you have a piano at home?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
The reason you had a piano was that your mother had studied voice and mostly classical music.
Yeah, we haven't really talked about your parents yet.
Yeah.
Maybe we should do that, huh?
to you,
Sound good, Nick?
Yeah.
So you want to talk about I don't care either one. Your
my
mom-
father, Edward Statom, had an interesting life. He was born, as he used to say, in the Commonwealth of Virginia, thank the Lord. And I left there as soon as I could, thank the Lord. And
And did he come out to California then?
no. He went to up north.
Oh,
He went north and learned to get rid of his southern accent as well as he could.
hmm.
I mean, he could turn it on and off,
Yeah.
but yeah,
What was his profession?
he had been he went to college and got to his divinity degree
Okay.
and became a Presbyterian minister. And he had been that for several years, a bunch of years, and wound up in several various funky little towns. I don't know where he started, but he went to Broken Bow, Nebraska. You ever hear of that?
No.
No.
And where was it are your relatives from? In
Luck, Wisconsin? No?
no, not Luck,
Well,
Wisconsin.
we don't know anything about his
Did you-
background.
Help me, don't hinder me. Please don't.
What European relatives?
This will be edited, so don't worry about messing
Yeah.
up.
Okay.
They're just
I need to
primarily.
I need the name of the place up there in Utah or Idaho or someplace where your cousin lives.
Idaho?
Harvey,
Oh, Colorado?
We went back. haven't we?
Brush, Colorado.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
there was another one of the towns, Brush, Colorado.
Oh.
But
And-
was he married at that time? Your dad?
Yeah,
Okay.
to his first wife, right?
yeah, right, to his first wife.
Uh-huh.
And they moved around, And one of the last ones was in, well, it was where I wound up being in boot camp in the Navy, Farragut, Idaho. It was on a lake there at the north end of Idaho. Idaho's is a kind of a peninsula up on the top of it. And that's where Farragut was.
Okay, so maybe we want to talk about your high school days and your parents growing. Well, we haven't even talked about growing up there. What are your earliest memories of where you were?
Well, the banjo story.
The banjo story.
Yeah, but how about riding your wagon that you'd made and
Yeah.
that your dad helped you make, and a lot of things he helped you with in those early years. You know, you said you took it up on the hills and rode down on that and things like that.
It's still out there.
Yeah,
And that's why I keep it.
I know, but I mean, tell the story. You can just, you know, your dad helped make a lot of things, I think,
Yeah,
with
right.
you.
He was good at that. He was handy.
Yeah, you can mention that.
Here's some things that might trigger some memories here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The scouts, you know,
Scouts,
your dad
oh,
was
yeah.
a scoutmaster.
He was the scoutmaster in Fullerton.
And didn't they even come up to Solvang one time as a group? Didn't you tell me that? About 1911? No, that would be the wrong time, because he wouldn't have been out here then. I thought you told me he came up to,
Yeah, that must have, I don't know when that was.
that couldn't have been then, but,
Yeah,
Well,
maybe
early
these
20s.
pictures, some of these pictures you probably don't even remember. I mean,
Yeah, I do remember that one on the tractor there.
you remember being on the tractor?
Oh, yeah. I drove that tractor all over the place, man.
well, remember you said before you died, you wanted to be on a tractor one more time.
I would still like to get on a tractor.
Yeah. Well, so your dad had this ranch.
2.5 acres.
Did they build a house?
Yeah.
He built a house?
Well, he and his handy men from Fullerton, from his congregation, built a house.
Okay. And how about the trees then? You said it was started out as persimmon,
Persimmons.
and that did or didn't go well or whatever, and then they converted to avocados?
Avocados, right. Yeah, persimmons went down and the avocados came up.
And that was when you were like, what age? Like,
Oh, boy.
yeah, I mean, I don't have to be exact, but
I'm not.
you remember working in the avocados?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
I think more about your earlier years.
Yeah, more, well, whatever you remember, I don't know, I mean,
Like
I
the
see
animals.
these pictures and I'm going, okay, well, you
They
actually
had,
remember
they had
that.
turtles, they had this,
Yeah,
Maybe you should
what
skip
was it,
ahead
that,
and explain
that,
Chuckawalla.
chuckawalla,
Chuckawalla.
yeah.
Big lizard.
And that was like a pet?
Yeah. Yeah, limited movable range, but
What was his name?
Stevie.
And then cooking, you and Hamner would cook stuff out in the outbuildings there because your mother didn't like
Yeah,
the
we did
smell of
that.
it.
There's that old, it's a stove.
Sauerkraut, was it sauerkraut or was something that smelled bad? I thought.
No, it was wieners and just cooked weenies and applesauce.
Oh, okay, well, that wasn't.
What was this, a staple meal that you guys would have?
Pre-scout beating, yeah.
Oh. So
Well,
your
you know-
dad was the scout leader?
Not alone, no. In Fullerton.
Okay.
In fact, that letter that's in my bathroom, but I always have my robe over it. is a bunch of his
Including,
students, I want to say, who wrote a letter and they
Yeah.
all signed it.
There was parishioners in Fullerton.
okay. Well, including Hezzy's husband, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
He's one of them.
Including Archie Vaughan. Remember Archie? You don't remember? I remember nothing. Famous. Look up the Pittsburgh Pirates and you'll find out about Archie Vaughan.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. Famous guy.
So we ready to go, Nixter? Or
Yep. We're recording.
no, we're recording.
Oh.
I mean, we can edit all this out.
So what do you want to go back to?
I guess what other interests or hobbies you had as growing up? You were kind of getting into music, but did you?
Where did you know, like, what group did you play with, and then your mother helping you with the rock and rolls type things?
No rock and
whatever it
roll.
was.
There was no rock and roll.
What was it that she
Boogie Woogie?
she would play the
Yeah.
chords or something?
Well, yeah. I played chords when she played the bass.
Oh, okay. Mention that. 'Cause, I mean, are we on?
And then were you in a band in high school, or were you?
Not exactly.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly when it was when I started with
Yeah.
where Dwayne Mays started this band. He was a year behind me in high school. But started this band in Fontana.
Okay.
And he and I were pretty good buddies. He played tenor.
Uh-huh. And would you play gigs then, or was it just more like for
Oh
fun?
yeah, we had a gig in Riverside, or like, was it every week? Maybe twice a month? I don't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah, we played there in the Riverside Civic.
Well, how about other things you did in high school? I know cars were probably a big thing at that point.
Yeah.
Or motorcycles, were you into that yet at all? Or?
No. Didn't get the motorcycle until I got out of high school, I think.
Okay. But did you have a car in high school?
Oh yeah,
And what was that?
I had a 28 Chevy. My
And how old were you when you got your license?
14.
And why was that?
Yeah, why was that? Just
Because I wanted to get going.
But why could you get it at the age of 14?
Because the state, they were state licenses.
I thought you had to have some emergency in order to get it that young.
No,
yeah,
you had a restricted license for a while. I
yeah.
don't remember how long that was. I think it was a year, maybe. You couldn't drive at night, and you had to drive in your parents' car.
Okay.
Now, how far away was your school? You would drive to school then, or
Not very often. My folks
How did you
wouldn't
get
let
to
me.
school?
On the bus.
Oh, I never heard you say that before.
What? That I rode the bus to high school?
Yeah,
Yeah,
never.
4 years.
I always heard about the cars, and I never went in a car.
What did you take? Did you take the bus to
I
school?
took a bus, and it just
Oh, yeah.
came from Buellton. Even
Yeah.
the teachers were riding in it, and then
Oh, really?
on to the high school. Yeah.
We had a huge fleet of buses at Chaffee.
Yeah.
It went way out. Like it went clear out to Lytle Canyon, and that's way up past Fontana and up north and into the foothills.
Mm-hmm.
That's a long way from Ontario.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Those guys kept the buses out there at night. The driver would keep it at night.
Okay.
You had a college student.
Then, well, I know you spent some time at the beach when you were a kid? Like I'm looking at this picture right here,
That's a different beach.
but what beach would you go to then?
Sunset Beach.
Sunset Beach.
What beach is that?
That's Laguna.
Oh. Why were you there?
Visiting.
But wouldn't you stay there during the summertime or something?
At Sunset, yeah.
And did you have a family house or did you rent something? or-
No, we stayed with Joseph P. Donaldson.
Oh, okay, same guy.
And how did you get there?
My dad would take us down.
What?
My dad would take us down.
Oh, you didn't ever take the,
Once we took the trolley.
oh.
Oh, huh.
You can go from Alta Loma into LA, change cars, down to the beach.
Well, that's a long haul to go
Yeah.
all the way to LA and then all the way back down the coast to
Yeah,
Laguna.
that's what it did.
Wow.
It was a day trip.
Yeah.
But from Alta Loma, with plenty of stops in between, Upland and Claremont, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, to get to Los Angeles. On the big red cars, Pacific Electric cars, took an hour to get from Alta Loma to downtown LA. And then they said they were changing the service. They were going to go to buses instead of the. And the time changed also. It took 2 hours now to go from Alta Loma into Los Angeles.
Downtown.
And to get to the bus, we had to go down to Cucamonga.
Yeah. So it made it even worse. Yeah.
So,
Well, I'm going to ask you about your dad a little bit more here.
Shoot.
I'm looking at this picture. He seems like he was kind of a character.
yeah, that stuff. North of our house, between our house and 19th Street, here's Amethyst, that was the street we lived on. Here's 19th.
Yeah.
Here's our house, and between our house and 19th Street was a community pump house. It had a large, big motor, electric engine.
So there's a big well there that they would draw from. Is that it?
There's a big reservoir there,
Okay.
and that stuff grew in the runoff from the reservoir. So there was a box on the bottom end of the pump house. Here's the reservoir, here's the pump, here's the box. Okay, and well, that stuff grew.
It's like moss or something.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and my dad would get some of them out of that box and make those beards.
Well, another interesting thing that he would do is find interesting pieces of wood and make you know, a face or something out of it,
Yeah.
which we do have a couple of.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But now he passed away when you were how old?
Let's see, junior.
Did you say 15?
15 or 16, huh?
Yeah.
And that
Let's see,
happened.
wait a minute, I was 13. Yeah, I'd say 15.
15. So that had to be traumatic, right?
It
I mean,
was. It was. I can still hear my mother saying, "Kiss him, Lee." He was there, he's in his bed, dying.
Yeah, dying of what was he?
Diabetes.
Diabetes.
It took it. Well, you know, he was crippled from a small child. He had not infantile paralysis, but the other stuff.
Spinal
Polio?
meningitis, or was it that, was it?
No,
Polio?
it wasn't polio.
Mm-hmm.
It was the other one.
well, whatever it was.
Yeah, and then how would that debilitate him then? What could,
He had one leg shorter than the other one.
okay.
And
Wasn't that what Billy has, Marilee? Same,
Oh, that's polio.
that was polio, okay,
yeah, because most people had polio, but he didn't. He had the other one.
okay,
Oh.
So ask your doctor.
yeah.
And you'll say, oh yeah, that was well.
But did that make him susceptible to the diabetes, or?
I don't know.
Because I don't think anybody else in the family's had it, right?
I don't think so. It took 5 years for it to get him.
Yeah,
Well, at least it was doing it. It was getting bad enough to be a problem, I guess, when they finally said what it was.
mm-hmm,
That was 1935. Remember that?
yeah. Yeah. And so then, after he passed, I mean, you had to take over, right? Or was your sister living there, or?
Yeah, but my sister and my mother never really got along.
Uh-huh,
That was always she had her own room, and we never saw her very often.
yeah,
Well, that would be traumatic to have having lived with your father for 20 years and then suddenly
Oh yeah,
he married.
she was like 25 or something like that.
Yeah.
yeah,
She was born in 01.
01, okay,
Yeah.
wow,
So she was, when I was born, she was 24.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's a
Was
shock.
she the same age as your mom then, or is she older or younger?
My mom was older than she was.
Okay,
I think, yeah.
yeah, about the same though, probably, huh?
I was
No,
thinking
my
that-
mom was born in 88.
Okay,
I was thinking she was about 36 when you were born. Is that right?
Yeah,
I was born in 25.
Yeah.
So
And
36
she was
to
born
30.
in 88.
She was born in
88,
88.
yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
So what happened then when your dad has passed away? How did you guys deal with it? Plus you were a junior in high school. The war was probably getting going.
Yeah, the war was one we were all anxious to get going.
Mm-hmm.
I can remember when you had to register for the draft at age 18. So we were. I wasn't 18 yet.
Speaking about Hezzy being at home, I do remember you telling the story about either dyeing your hair or cutting it,
Well, we peroxided it.
and she was so incensed that she left the house. I mean, she was living in the house at the time. She was so incensed.
She
That
left
you
the house
did
for a
that.
week. Yeah.
Well, she was teaching there. I'm sure.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
The big scandal, right? Oh God.
Well, a bunch of us did. I remember the day we did it, man. In Joe Scrisano's backyard.
How many of you did that? Was
Oh boy, there's probably about 5 or 6 of us.
completely blonde then? Kind of.
Well, sort of, yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that probably caused a scene at school, I'm guessing.
No, because a lot of guys were doing it.
Oh, so that was kind of a hip
Just,
thing to do.
just at home, I guess.
A rite of passage or something. I don't know.
Now, I've got to remember one other thing you told me once was that you broke both wrists
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
in the avocado tree. Was that it, or what happened?
Oh, no.
No?
No. One of the guys that I went to high school with, he was one of what I always considered to be the big kids. The ones who were 2 or 3 years older than I was.
Yeah.
And his name was Vernon Bursma. Vernon had got a set of weights,
Yeah.
pole,
Yeah. Yes. Sure.
weights. And several of us were in his his driveway, I guess it was. He lived kind of out in an orchard out in Alabama. And we were lifting the weights, and the driveway was kind of sloping a little bit. And I got the weight on the thing, and I got it up, and so forth. And my feet slipped, and I went down.
Oh, that's what happened. Okay.
Both wrists went snap.
So then you were
So I
in
had these casts on
both.
both wrists.
And that was so newsworthy, it was in the local paper that he'd done that.
And
But I can still drive my Model A.
okay,
Yes.
but you probably couldn't. Could you write or anything? You probably couldn't.
Yeah, well, I was taking this class, Algebra 2. Busted my wrist, couldn't write.
From your sister? Were you taking that class?
No. Harry Cousins,
Oh, okay.
Old Jelly Belly, as he was called by the students. Yeah. So that became an F on my.
Uh-oh. Because you couldn't solve
do
the
anything.
problem.
Yeah.
So you got an F?
No, yeah.
Algebra 2. Oh my gosh.
And there it is on my transcript. So, yeah, I was that was just before I registered for the draft.
Really? You were that?
And that did that throw off your eligibility or anything, or?
Yes, it was when I was going to get into college when I got out of the service.
Okay.
And I was going to register for Chafee, and I had to go up and talk to Wayne Mather, who himself was a Chafee graduate.
Okay.
He was now working at the school. And, yeah. And I had his dad, it's Wiley Mather, for political science at Chafee College.
Okay.
So was he a lawyer?
Who?
Mather.
Leonard?
Mather.
Which one?
Because when your
Leonard?
mother died, wasn't her will put together?
That's
Mather.
Wiley Mather.
Okay.
Yeah.
He's the professor.
Well, then, so maybe we get into the war a little bit then. So that was right around when you were drafted, huh?
It was before I got drafted.
Did you get drafted or did you volunteer?
I signed up for the draft and they took me.
Okay.
But of course, all of us were eager. I can remember Bob Ferguson and I and Jack Dieter would go down to the draft board. When are you guys going to take us? And after
Yeah, because you guys were a little bit younger than others who were in the war. I mean, you were like just 18, right? When you went in. And
I was 18.
That was kind of the last year or two of the war, right?
Yeah, February 1944 is when I went in. February 24th.
Yeah, so
And I realized after I got into the service, man, all I wanted to do was get out.
Why is that? Not.
It was, not exactly compatible with the lifestyle I had.
And you weren't together with your friends either anymore, were you? I mean,
Yeah, we went to boot camp together.
Oh, you
And
did?
where was that again, the boot camp?
Farragut, Idaho.
And what time of year was that there?
It was in the winter, baby.
Oh,
February.
wow. Okay.
But when you got there, didn't you get the
Well,
sick?
You want to hear all this?
Well, sure.
I had been having problems, at least twice, maybe 3 times a year. I would feel like I had appendicitis. And I got to where I could head it off a little bit by doing certain things. and it would go away. So I got to Farragut. 2 weeks I'm there, and I hear, uh-oh. I wake up, oh baby, look out. So I went to the hospital. I thought, well, maybe they were going to take it out. You know. Then it went away. But I was in the hospital, and of course, the next thing I got in the hospital was measles.
Oh my gosh.
So I went there for 2 weeks, and then, same hospital, but different ward. And then, lo and behold, in the end of the 2 weeks, I was approximately ready to get out because I still didn't have any appendicitis. And I went to the ear ward because the ear measles went into my ear. So I spent 6 weeks in the hospital. That was about, well, I think I was in camp about 2 weeks before I got there.
Yeah.
So I was like 2 months. And all it was the hospital and
But then did that put you behind your friends who were there?
oh yeah.
Yeah, so they were
They're
done.
long gone.
Long gone, huh?
Yeah, I started there in in group 241, and I graduated from boot camp in group 448. So there was always new bunches all the time going through the
So this was the Navy, but they had their boot camp in, what was it again?
Farragut, Idaho.
Is there any water there?
Yes, there's a lake.
Okay.
Lake Penderay. Look on your,
Yeah.
you'll see Lake Penderay.
Okay. And so then when you were done there, what happened? Then where did you go?
And I went down to torpedo school. They made our choice of going to those schools. And
And the torpedo school was where? San Diego?
in San Diego.
Okay.
And I hitchhiked home from there on weekends.
Nice. Yeah.
So what happened?
Yeah, so then did you graduate from torpedo school or what happened?
Well, no. Yes, I did from the first school, but you could also go to the advanced school.
Okay.
Well, one night I was home on a weekend pass from the torpedo school, and I was taking a girl to the Palladium, Margie Reeder. Well, we're driving in, and do you know where LA General Hospital is now? It's in kind of out in the middle of the eastern part of LA.
Yeah, no.
Look in your Google and you'll find it. Los Angeles General Hospital. Way out, which it was way out in the boondocks in those days. Kind of sitting there forlornly by itself out in this area. You can believe that, man. Now it's all
Yeah, built up around
big
it.
buildings. Anyhow, I got pulled over. It was, and there was no traffic, man. Zippo. This guy pulled me over. I was doing 37 and a 25.
Oh, jeez.
Come on. He said, oh, don't worry about it. He says, it'll catch up with you. Well, it did. I was just about to graduate, or I was doing really well in the advanced school, because if you did well during the week, then you got a 2-day pass. And I had a pass nearly every week.
Yeah.
I was doing good. And so I had to to make a long story short, I had to go to court, a civilian court. I mean, not a civilian court, a service court.
For your speeding ticket.
Yeah, for speeding. Yeah. And I can still hear this old guy. He was a I don't know, captain maybe, lieutenant. He says, damn kids, going like hell. And that was the end of advanced school for me. That was sea duty for you. And off I went.
Wow.
I spent a couple of months at Camp Elliott. That was a place, and you probably know where that is, Nick.
Yeah. It's kind of by Poway. It's a
Is
little
it,
east.
yeah, is it still there?
Mm-hmm. It's, well,
It isn't Camp Elliott.
it's not Camp Elliott. Actually, UCSD owns part of it.
No.
Our university, we have a storage area there.
Yeah,
But it's kind of in the sticks.
that's where I was. Camp Elliott.
Hot.
Yeah.
Well, you were there, I guess, after the winter.
No,
so
it was in the
spring.
fall.
Oh, okay.
It was just before I went overseas, so that was my last station. Because it was from there down to the sea and ships, and the old Long Island was a converted World War I carrier, which had been converted from a merchant ship to a carrier. They put a carrier, cut the top off, put a carrier deck on it.
Wow.
It was a clunker. It took us a week to get from San Diego to Pearl Harbor. Then it took a couple more weeks to get over to Manus, the Admiralty Islands. You can look those up on your Google too. Manus was where I was, and that was a big, like, kind of a distribution point for replacement personnel. And I went from there up to the Philippines. Well, first over to Borneo. I was there for about a week. And that was an interesting place. What was the name of the place in Borneo? I thought I'd never forget it. I can still see it. Hot. Wake up in the morning, beautiful. Not a cloud in the sky. Then maybe 9 or so, 10 o'clock in the morning, you might be able to see a little cloud way off in the distance. And then in about 20 minutes, clouds all over the place, and it's pouring down rain.
Mm-hmm.
And the red dirt that was dust has now become mud. And there they are. These guys driving those trucks through that stuff. And there we were boy, I can't think of the name of the place.
Yeah, that's all right.
What would your mother send you when you were in the service?
Peanut butter.
Yeah.
She would get a container of oatmeal, the round, the old regular
Sure.
oatmeal containers.
With oatmeal in them.
Yeah, with the oatmeal on it. Then take out some of the oatmeal, put it in a jar of peanut butter, and fill it back up with oatmeal.
Oh.
Worked perfectly. And we would get them on the Coney. I remember Keene Rafferty and I sitting up in there's on the side of if you see a picture of a destroyer, you will see that up on the outside of the ship, but at about the same point where the bridge is, from the forefront to the back. You see this little whaleboat hanging from a crane. Here's this little boat. So that then when they wanted to send the captain over to talk to somebody, they would drop the thing down into the water and load in the captain and one of the coxswains would take him over to the shore or wherever it was.
Yeah.
Well, here am I, Rafferty and I, sitting in this whaleboat with a jar of peanut butter. We get a box of crackers from the scullery, and we're up there having crackers and peanut butter. That's my crackers and peanut butter story.
By the way, when you were in high school, can you tell the story about being in the gym? Leland Gatchell, was that his name? Can you tell that story?
You want me to?
I think it's so funny, but I don't know whether you can tell that story.
Well, that was my freshman year in high school.
Yeah.
Leland Gatchell was a big man from Fontana, and he was, 18 years old, graduate, senior. And I'm like, you don't want me to tell this,
Yes,
do
tell that
you?
story. I think it's so funny.
Well, it's like, here is the PE shower area. A whole bunch of lockers, little lockers where you stuff in your clothes when you're changed to a gym outfit. They don't have those anymore, do they?
Nope. Well, they have them. They have the lockers, but they don't. The kids do not shower together. I would say that's not. If they do, they don't go naked. Let's put it that way.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Well, things were different in our days. And I can still remember here I am, little freshman. Dear. Huddling behind my locker there. And here are these three big guys, especially this Leland Getchell. Hair all over his body, man, and a very large appendage. Strutting down you had to go from, here's the showers, way up and went into the room, Strutting from the showers back down to where his locker was. Ha ha ha, and they're laughing and strutting and flopping and whatnot. Oh dear.
And there's little Lee hiding
And
behind.
then there I am.
All the
hiding,
little freshmen hiding out.
yeah, hiding behind, man. Only about 6 pubic hairs. Oh dear, it was a interesting experience for me. Coming from Altaloma. Country kid, man.
Yeah.
30 kids in my class, graduating class.
I'm curious about your music evolution there. When you were in high school, you started playing in the band a little bit, but then you were on a little hiatus while you were in the war, right? Were you able to play any music or listen to anything? There was no leisure
I remember
time.
once or twice I get a play to play, but not very often, no.
Right.
We were over there actually, it's funny. What's the name of the big island right off China that used to belong to China?
Was it
Taiwan.
Shanghai?
Taiwan.
Taiwan.
And it was, those days it was called, I can't think of it, I'm sorry. Google it out, you'll find it out. Taiwan.
Yeah.
It was called, damn, I can't think of it.
Well, never mind, just go ahead and tell
All
the
right.
story.
You'd be amazed how many times I have to say that. And
Formosa?
Formosa, right.
Good job, man.
I
That's it.
googled it.
No.
Okay. Formosa. Why were we doing Formosa?
We were talking about music while you were.
Oh, there was a piano and we were on the Coney and we tied up there at D1, Formosa. D1, is that it? I think that's it. And there was a piano and we had to take a train from where we were into this other city. It's about like, what, maybe 10, 15 miles. This train, and then we wandered around there, and there was a building there with a piano in it, so I sat down and played.
How much music did you take in high school then?
Zero.
Yeah, zero.
Zero.
No music.
Nada. Nothing.
Yeah. And you never took any lessons when you were younger or anything like that on the piano? either?
Zero. Nada. Nothing.
Yeah.
If anybody had told me when I was, say, in 8th grade that I was going to wind up as a music teacher, I was kidding me. Cut it out.
So how did you get to UCSB then, as a music major?
I lucked out.
Well, wait a minute now. We got to, before we do that, you're still in the war. The war ended. You got out, but
Mm-hmm.
is that when you went to Chaffee?
College.
Yes, and then you went to Loyola even before you went to
Yes.
UCSB.
1 year.
What was your major at college at that
At
point?
Loyola or at Chaffee?
Well, either one. Chaffee,
Chaffee, journalism.
journalism.
Why did I take journalism? Because I bumped into one of my high school friends over at in the Philippines, and we happened to be anchored there, and he said he was going to take journalism. Yeah, I'll give that a shot. So I did.
Did you like it?
Yeah, I did. Had some interesting teachers.
Mm-hmm.
Had Wiley Mather.
Yeah, I met him, and he was an interesting.
He was an interesting character if there ever was. It's strictly old school.
Yeah.
And let's see, who else did I have? His son Leonard was one of the administrators at Chaffee. And let's see,
How long were you at Chaffee?
USS Coney.
Chaffee 2 years, freshman, sophomore.
Uh-huh.
That's all it was.
And then what made you choose Loyola?
I became interested in Catholicism. And I wanted to go into Loyola, so I did. We had the GI Bill. And by the way, the GI Bill, bless their hearts, lasted me for books, and I never took, you could get money for rent and living and groceries and so forth too. But you'd rent it out sooner.
Yeah.
But I just took books and tuition, and it lasted me all the way through 6 years of college.
And you were interested in Catholicism. What had you been in what religion had you been brought up in?
Presbyterian.
So how'd you become interested in Catholicism?
not really sure about
I
that.
thought, wasn't there someone on the ship that you would talk to about it? About his
Not on the
religion?
ship,
No?
but at Chafee, yeah.
Oh, why
At
did I
college.
think you would be on watch and he would tell you about his religion? I don't know.
Maybe you're right.
That didn't sound familiar, huh?
Yeah, I probably did talk to Rafferty about that.
Was he a Catholic?
Yeah,
Sounds like he's Irish. Rafferty?
Rafferty, yeah. Keen Alexander Rafferty III.
Well, when you were Presbyterian, did your dad take you to church?
Uh-huh. Yeah, that's where I learned to drive. To and from Upland Presbyterian
Uh-huh.
to Altaloma.
Yeah. But your mother didn't go.
No,
Your
Oh,
mother
she
was
didn't go.
Episcopalian.
Oh, wow, okay.
Did Hezzy ever go with you?
never.
Yeah.
Just me and my dad.
Now, Lee, let us know when you're getting tired.
Yeah, maybe we ought to take a little break here or something.
Here's the motor whaleboat right there.
That's where you hung out eating
Yeah,
crackers.
you can
and
see
peanut
us
butter.
hanging out over the side of the
That's
ship
his
there.
ship?
Yeah, that's his
Oh,
ship.
wow.
How many people were on that ship?
250.
Gosh.
Not a very big ship.
Did you share bunks? Like you slept in?
No, we didn't share
no, I
bunk.
mean, like the next shift would take your bunk when you were working?
No.
Everyone, there were that many.
We
I've
had our
heard
own-
of them when you have to.
We had our own.
I'm sure they were stacked close though. You didn't.
Yeah.
Have
Oh yeah. They were like maybe 5 or 6. It depended on where they were. If there were lockers under them, then
Was that claustrophobic being down there in the?
Yeah,
Just gave
I
you
didn't
some-
notice it.
Yeah.
The submarines.
Hey, that's our old ship, man. And there's a bridge there, and there's the motor whaleboat. There's gun number 1, and there used to be a gun number 2 up there, but right now it's been being replaced with something.
Did you ever shoot the guns on your ship?
Yeah, we had to do that.
Yeah, well, there's another question. Did you guys see any action that,
Yeah, a little bit.
yeah.
We went on some interesting junkets to various places. We went to one that went down toward south from the Philippines. Oh dear, where was that? Borneo.
Gosh.
And there was a guy went down in a plane there near where we were and picked up, and there was a couple of, it's very fuzzy.
Yeah.
And I'm not remember if they went to one of the other destroyers or to us, but I can still see that plane down there and the tail is sticking up out of the water and there's a guy standing on the tail.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
gosh.
Wow.
Well, didn't you get off and see cockfights and stuff like that?
That was in the Philippines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's getting tired.
Yeah, I think so.
I think
He's running out of gas.
No, I think, well, I can't even imagine going that long talking.
The cockfights, is that what you want to know
Yeah,
about?
well, that's what I thought. You got off and you saw things like that happening.
Well, yeah, we were anchored in Subic Bay.
Google it.
Subic. And that's where a lot of ships were gathered at Anchorage, and we went over to get stores one day. I remember this, in the motor whaleboat. They sent us over to where they were distributing the oranges, where I don't remember where that was. But anyhow, we went over there and we got all these oranges. There's a motor whaleboat full of boxes of oranges. And I can remember eating oranges from the time we got them on the motor whaleboat until we got back to the ship, which was at the other end of Pacific Bay. And I ate 18 oranges. Because we hadn't had any fruit,
You
man.
had scurvy.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
There's Subic Bay.
So you just did like, you were just on the boat continuously for like 6 months, say, or was this in total?
Where?
Your time on the Coney total.
Time on the Coney. For, let's see, from February 1945 to May 1946.
Wow.
That was it on the Coney. About a year and 3 months.
Yeah.
Sheesh.
Yeah. You see, it's a big place, man.
And most of the time, though, you were in the Pacific, out in the east.
I didn't
Sorry,
go to the
the
Atlantic
west.
at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank goodness. Because I had chronic seasicknesses.
Oh, God. Yeah, great.
And for a sailor, it's not too good. Fortunately, most of the places we were didn't have any really rough water.
Nice.
I know what I thought about was his interest in Spanish.
Oh, yeah, we didn't talk about
Friend
that.
he has, whose family was
That would be a good one to bring
Dave
up.
Hernandez.
That's what I was trying to get to, because I knew you had journalism, but were at Loyola, were you a Spanish major?
Yeah, I was for a semester.
Okay. And then when you got to UCSB, what, did you have to declare something? Is that?
Yep.
And that's when you went.
Journalism.
and he
Oh, you did go journalism at UCSB.
UCSB.
Oh no, UCSB, I'm sorry. Wrong.
Yeah, he went there with some friends who were musicians. That's why he.
I knew some guys that, actually they were in Earl Ferguson's band that played at the Ontario Legion in high school. And I respected them because their musicianship. Bob McKnight and Art Flake. And I knew they were going to UCSB, and so I thought I'd give it a shot. Why, I don't know.
Mhm.
Maybe I got a signal from upstairs.
Is that going, Nick?
Mhm.
Yeah. Well, keep going with that story then. So
So
you arrived at UCSB then, a music major, and
And I finally had, remember I told you I had those appendicitis
right.
pains? Well, I had one. But another one before this time. It was when I was just about ready to get out of the Navy. And so I had gotten from Charleston, South Carolina, where our ship was being decommissioned at that time, and into San Pedro for the discharge center. And I felt that same old, oh no. So I took 2 aspirin, went to bed and lay on my left side, which I knew would work. Because I think, man, I'm getting out of here. I don't want to have anything to do with this. So stupid, man.
Yeah.
It would have been paid for.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
right, yeah.
Sure, I've still been in the Navy, man.
Yeah.
And it went away, and I got out. And I remember walking. There's a walkway at that time, over it was a busy street. Now, maybe it's a freeway now or something. In San Pedro, my sea bag over my shoulder, and so long, guys. And there we went.
And then, so then you had a year at Loyola, and then,
Then I went to Chaffee.
oh, you went to Chaffee.
After Loyola, we went to Chaffee.
No,
No,
I went to Chaffee and then I went to Loyola.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
2 years at Chaffee, 1 year at
2.
Loyola,
Uh-huh.
and then what?
What,
And
yeah,
3 years at UCSB.
and what made you go to UCSB?
I knew Flake and,
Okay, so the same
and
story.
McKnight were going there, and I thought I'll give it a shot. I had no idea it was going to be a teacher training type.
Oh,
And that's when I got there and signed up and everything, and I found out it was going to be for a teacher training emphasis.
what did I get myself into?
Faulkner was training the future music teachers for all the whole area.
Mhm.
So I got my degree, and I got the Oceano.
Yeah. But that's when you met Mom, right?
Yeah,
We're gonna
UCSB.
We're gonna eat?
Uh-huh.
It's
I
already-
still see her sitting on the lunch table out there. Well, there's a little snack shack there, and then there was a lunch table. There she is. She had a green.
No, not right then. I wasn't wearing it then because that was after I met you. Then I called my mother. I said, I saw this outfit at Andera's. Can I buy it?
Oh,
And that was that green outfit.
Okay. I remember the green outfit
Yeah.
really well.
But
but where did you meet, on campus?
Yeah, UCSB.
In a class though, or just
No, you know, there was a snack
Snack
shack there.
snack shack?
And he showed up, he was wearing like an overcoat or something, and nobody had long hair then. And he had long hair because he just had his appendix out.
There's where the.
Oh, so I was gonna ask that question. You eventually did have to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I did have the appendix out.
Before had you been at the campus before that happened, or had it just happened? And
It
then
just-
you arrived at the campus?
I had signed up before it happened.
Yeah,
And then it happened, the appendicitis.
yeah.
And then I had the appendix out. And then I went to UCB.
And he showed up in that condition, and it was sort of jive talk that I never heard before, and who is that guy? Yeah.
Who's this jive talking old gringo?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then it was a good friend of ours who, on both sides, because by then you were living behind, what's the?
Mrs. Blair's house?
No, not Mrs. Blair. When you first came, did you live at Mrs. Blair's house?
Well, I lived with dear Aunt Mabel for a couple.
Oh, that's
Couple
right.
of
Tell that
weeks.
story. Is it recorded?
Yes.
Okay. Tell the story about your Aunt Mabel.
Oh, Mabel was totally old school.
Yeah.
Totally old school. She had a maid, and the maid did everything. My Aunt Mabel, she would ring the bell. She'd ring the bell, and the maid would come, and she would tell her what to do. But she was very interesting.
Yeah, but the maid would change a plate,
Oh,
a
yeah.
clean plate that had been underneath the other plate you'd just eaten on, and bring you some more plates and another thing to eat.
There was this changing of the plates, man. I can't even describe it right now. I think Elsa did that very well there.
Well, I can because I went to a girl's house where the same thing took place.
So your Aunt Mabel, how is she
She's
related?
my mother's cousin.
Cousin, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Her name is Mabel Washburn,
yeah.
and I don't think, well, there was cousin Philip Washburn,
Yeah.
and he was in the Spanish Civil War.
Oh.
And that was that 1935 or 36, something like that. It was before World War II.
Okay.
And he was probably like, at that time, a young guy like me wanted to go off and get in the war. Because we all wanted to go.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that. Rush. When are you guys going to take us to the draft board?
Well, you didn't really say much about your mother's background in New York because she had a lot of relatives, and
Yeah,
that we found out later,
yeah.
and they you could talk about your Dutch relative who bought a farm outside of New York.
It was New Amsterdam then.
Yeah,
It was first called New Amsterdam because it was Dutch guys that settled it.
Mm-hmm.
and then on that property was, I think, the City Hall of New York later on.
Could be.
And then for years, people who were related to this farmer owned that property together. And your mother received a promissory note, and she got an income from that for years.
Okay.
And then they finally sold it,
She knows all this, man.
and each of our children received $2,000 out of that. There were like 122 people on this list to receive money from the sale of this. And Lee received $40,000, and each of our children received $2,000 from that. And then all those other relatives, because Lee was the next generation to receive more than the next generation after that, along with a cousin he had who was at Midland School in Solvang.
The San Ynez Valley.
Yeah, and he was the principal, the headmaster, they called it.
And his name was
Benedict Rich.
Benedict Rich.
Yeah.
I think we just left off right when you met Elsa. So
At the snack shop.
at the snack shop.
Oh,
The snack shop
where you met,
On
where
campus.
you saw me.
at UCSB.
Yeah.
And so then you guys started courting?
No,
No.
I thought.
but he was he was interested in me, but and it was his landlady, Ethel, who finally had 2 tickets to see Harvey, which was a not a movie but a play, and so she had these 2 tickets and somehow got both of us to go. I didn't even really know him that much, but then it was after that that
These young people probably have no idea what Harvey is, right?
I do.
it's
The Jimmy
it's
Stewart
a movie
movie.
with
Yeah.
it was
Jimmy
a movie
Stewart
with
movie?
Jimmy Stewart, but
Yes.
at that time it was just
It's a play.
a play.
Yeah.
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 It's a guy who drinks and sees a rabbit.
Seems all right. Giant rabbit talking. Well, Harvey came with me here. I'll open the door for you, Harv.
No.
Yeah, it was cute.
And then,
And then he didn't have a car or anything, so let's see, my brother,
I didn't.
he didn't have a car at that time.
Yeah, I lost my license for a year.
What was that from? Boy, he sure got in trouble.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't a ticket or anything. It was. I had some mental problems, and I had to have an exam, to renew your license. And they said you're going to have to be without a license for a year. So I
Wow.
Wow.
So there I was in college and no car.
Yeah.
But I was trying to think. Oh, because we then knew each other, and I lived one place and Lee lived another, and we'd walk back and forth. But I was thinking that was a little bit later. My brother was, while I was living in this house with a bunch of girls, my parents came with my brother one night and said that he was going into the Air Force. And somebody in Solvang knew that his name was coming up for the draft, and if he wanted to choose where he was going to go, he needed to volunteer.
Mm-hmm.
So they came up and said he was leaving, and I lived in a 3-story house that we lived in the attic part. We were a bunch of music students, and
Up on the hill.
yeah. But was I going with you at that time? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
But then later on, there was a party for my brother.
Yeah, but it was down at another house. It was a 2-story
Yeah, I'd
one
already
down
moved
on
to another house.
one of those long Santa Barbara.
And
what
we
they
were
say
close
the north
enough
and
that
west
we could
and north
walk
and
back
south
and
streets,
forth.
but they're really east and west.
Yeah. And anyway, we'd talk on the phone, and then he would come over, and he would stay so late the bus wasn't running anymore. So then I'd walk a little bit of way back with him to his place. And he proposed to me somewhere along that way under a tree.
Yeah, it was right across the street from some old funny church, right?
How long had you guys been going together at that point? Just
A year maybe,
Okay.
I'm not sure.
yeah.
Did you ever have classes together or no?
Yes, and Lee was always late. By that time, you had a car.
Yeah, I got my license back.
Yeah, and he would be driving in the last minute, and this parking lot was like on the slant and everything, and you just knew that last car coming in there, that was Lee.
Sounds like your
Yeah,
kids.
and fast. I mean,
Yeah.
but Lee knew a lot about, not so much about classical music by name or anything like that. It was jazz and stuff like that, and but just harmony and counterpoint, all those things, you did well.
Now, what about the introduction to Elsa's folks? How did you? Do you remember that? The first time you met them?
Let's see, how do we get him?
Well, I hitchhiked out there, right?
You went with the guy who delivered the papers.
Yeah, the guy who delivered the.
Solvang.
Yeah.
I don't know how we got in touch with him.
I don't remember. I do vaguely remember something about that, but I said this guy delivers the San Ynez Valley paper.
No, it was the Santa Barbara paper.
It was the
he
Santa
was
Barbara
delivering.
paper.
Yeah, 'cause everybody took the Santa Barbara paper.
Yeah.
And
So he just showed up one day. Did you know he was coming? Or?
yeah, I think so, but I don't remember. I don't think you had a car. You didn't have a car then, because Arlen must have met you or knew who you were, because he stopped.
No, he didn't know.
He picked you
I
up.
was hitchhiking.
I
was
know,
hitchhiking
at
from
that
Buellton.
point you were hitchhiking, so was that before the paper guy started taking you? Because Arlen said, going to Solvang?
Yeah. No, I remember that very well, very distinctly. Old Sarge, bless his heart.
Yeah.
So he met. Okay.
That was before he even went in the service.
So anyway, and I don't know, before you got married, was that when you made those walnut things for my dad? Or were we
Sweetheart,
married already?
You always mention those things, and I vaguely remember making them, but
My parents needed something to put the walnuts in, and it was wire on the
Oh,
bottom. And you get out of there.
1x6 frame.
And he did such a good job. I mean, all the corners were matching and all this stuff. And I think they still have them.
Yeah, they do have them.
Yeah. But
Have the
now
walnuts
nobody
in the
wants
box.
to crack walnuts, you know. Buy them already
Yeah.
cracked.
Well,
And
But
after-
then how did that go then? I mean, it had to be some kind of culture clash between
Yeah.
Dad,
Well, they had to get used to Daddy, and he was, of course, Catholic, and I do remember my mother saying, you know, after we decided we would get married, wouldn't you like to go on a trip to Europe?
yeah, Mama.
But he turned out very good. You know, we used to go see my uncle, who was, you know, my godfather, really, and he blended right in there with
Alfred?
Uncle
yeah,
Alfred.
he blended
Yeah.
right in with the Christmas, you
Uncle
know, the
Alfred,
New Year's
yeah.
Day things that
Well,
we
he was
used to
very-
do.
He was
Yeah.
very welcoming,
Yeah.
Uncle
Yeah.
Alfred. Yeah.
I can still see him standing out there in front of his on his porch. Hello, Lee.
Yeah, they were great.
And then you went to work for,
That was before we
was that?
got our moved. You know, after we got married, we lived in one of the apartments that they owned there, and during that time, Daddy made spaghetti for the Torps, who were good friends of ours, of my parents, and in that little apartment. And when he was through, that little kitchen had every utensil, every pot used to make that spaghetti dinner. And that was just for, you know, just for the summer before we went off for our jobs.
Okay.
And I do remember there was a guy next door who'd start up his car and wake us up like 3:30 or 4 o'clock, and he could never get it started. You remember that?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, I think I finally got up one day and said something to him. I can't remember what, but of course he couldn't do anything. I mean, he had a car that
Yeah.
wasn't that great.
He wasn't worried about a nosy housewife at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
He was just worried about getting to work before he got fired.
And then when we got married, you know, it was in the mission, which was of course different for my family and all the Danes. And Momo was nervous about whether people would show up, because in those days you just put an ad in the paper and you said, Lee and Elsa are getting married, you're invited to come. And you didn't serve dinner, you just had cake and sandwiches and cookies. And you never knew how many people were going to come, and anybody could come.
Oh gosh.
And if you were giving a gift, you would go over to the jeweler and you'd put down $20 or whatever and put your name down, and something would have been picked out, like some silverware or something. And then however many people put money down on that particular thing would buy that much of the silverware or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyway, when we got married, then we drove by the movie theater. And here was this Danish couple, and they were going to the movie theater. They were going to the movies, and my mother's heart sank, I think, because she thought, oh, nobody's going to come to the wedding. But, you know, everybody came. When I look at those pictures, and see all those parents of, you know, kids I knew and all the Danish people and everything. They were there. They were dancing. We have a picture, you know, dancing there. So.
That was Ivan and Ellen Sorensen playing, right?
Yeah, the Cuckoos they were called,
Cuckoos, right.
local band, and also Melanie recently found some Danish writings and she gave them to me, and it turns out that one of them was this lady, a wife of a minister, and they were friends of my parents, and they came to the wedding and they taught the priest how to say a prayer in Danish. But I didn't realize that's what he was saying. I thought
He was Irish, man. What do you think?
Who was that priest? Was it that father?
Father Tim O'Sullivan.
Yeah, I remember him.
Good guy.
yeah, it was good.
A wonderful guy.
Yeah,
He was there for a long time.
Yeah, he was.
Yeah.
Franciscan, right? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, because Lee didn't have very much family, did anyone from your side of the family who showed up to the wedding?
My sister and my mother.
Okay.
Yeah, and they came together.
Oh.
And
And that was something.
where were we gonna? I didn't realize that there was that much friction at the time. So my parents were going to give up their room and let both of them stay in because they had single beds. If I had known that, I would. Anyway, that did not happen. That was supposed to happen. They would both share a bedroom. No, forget that. Anyway, Hezzy ended up taking your mother back to Santa Barbara, and they got a motel.
Hotel there.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I'm sure it was stressful, maybe, the whole thing.
Maybe they
and
had a good
the
time.
dress that Granny wore was a dress she had made out of material that Lee had bought in Singapore.
Singapore?
I don't know, where would you have gotten
I
that?
don't remember ever being in Singapore, but
Oh, okay. Where were you in the Orient?
Manila?
Was
Philippines.
it from there? Anyway, this material was bought, silk was bought.
I don't remember
Anyway,
that.
she had a dress made out of it
Oh.
from that material.
I don't remember that at all. So
Kind of exotic looking.
I bet you probably wouldn't.
Singapore, no.
So, do we talk about working for Bestafal?
We didn't talk about that. You did work for him,
Yeah.
right? That.
Yeah, but that was just like
That was the summer before
vacations.
we got our teaching jobs that he worked for my dad. And maybe you might have done that before that.
Yeah, I'd hit a weekend every once in a while.
Yeah.
Was he
what
a
happened?
taskmaster?
I do remember something, a vivid impression. And that was, it was one of those weekend jobs. There was a house in what was then the east side of Buellton, side closest to Salt Lake.
Mm-hmm.
There was a little street there, there was some houses. And I was sandpapering low-level cabinets. And I had to get down on my knees and inside those cabinets and sandpaper.
Oh.
And I thought to myself, maybe out loud, I don't know, some people do this for a living. You're lucky you got a teaching job, baby.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I can really remember that. Some people do this for a living, and they do it 50 weeks a year.
And what was the other thing that you remember from that, from working for him?
Oh, you weren't supposed to make yourself as comfortable as possible in these uncomfortable positions. You were supposed to hurt. So get down on your knees and sand that stuff down low. Do not try to sit down and do it.
Yeah. Don't look comfortable when
Don't,
anybody
yeah.
comes in.
We're supposed to look comfortable. It's supposed to hurt.
All right.
But my dad, once in a while, when he was not when he was at home for lunch or something, he would sneak a little bit of a nap. But if the phone rang for him, then he would make it sound like he came in from the outside and been working. So stomp, stomp, stomp to the telephone.
Oh, because the person that answered the phone still had the phone up and they could.
So I guess going into the job, like how you got your teaching jobs or how you moved up here, which one came first?
Yeah, how'd you decide to come up here for a teaching job?
You know, somebody asked us that question, you know, at Ivan's the other day. I think we were just assigned. This
Out
is
of
where the
UCSB?
teaching jobs are, and
Okay.
this is where you're going to go.
No, I don't think we were assigned.
I was,
We
well,
had
of
to
course,
come
in
up
my
with-
case, it was Marion who called me. But in your case, how did you
I had to
get
come
that?
up and interview with Mrs. Northey.
I know that, but you already had the job.
No, I didn't have the job until I got it after the
Well,
interview.
then how did you get Mrs. Northey's name and not somebody over in the valley or something?
Probably from Marion.
From Marion?
Yeah.
Oh. Yeah,
Now,
Marion,
who-
I
who
guess,
these
was,
They're fellow classmates at UCSB.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Marion Moreno,
yeah,
teacher at Judge.
Yeah.
yeah.
And he was from Santa Barbara. He was old Santa Barbara, right?
Yeah.
They
Oh,
had
yeah.
family
His father
family
had a
ranch
ranch.
there. Yeah.
On the
His
west.
father was, you know how flamboyant Marion was and everything, but his father was an old school Latino rancher. And he had this ranch, and they would have parties out there, and they would bury a head of a steer or something like that, you know, and feed all of us from that.
Yeah, cook it all night.
From the music department.
Dig a big hole,
Oh,
Yeah,
put in coals and stuff, and
yeah.
Didn't they have a fancy kind of Spanish style house in town also? I just have a vague memory of going there.
Wasn't
For a
Marion had a
party.
small one, but it was right by the railroad. In fact, the year that fire came all the way down from the hillside there, it got very close to his house.
in fact, the railroad track stopped it.
Oh, really?
Came all the way down in about a half hour, man.
Yeah.
Came all the way down from up there. What's the name of that place up there? Come on.
Well, I always think of when Brendan lived up there, Camino Cielo or something like that.
That's the name of the road.
Yeah, but the fire, I'm not sure what they called it that time.
The area up there.
But
Has a
that
name.
actually happened when we were in Europe, I think. That fire.
I can remember watching it on television.
the Riviera?
Hmm?
Is it the Riviera?
No,
No.
you're over here. It's over here.
Cathedral?
The Riviera, I lived in some houses around the Riviera. Well, not really on the Riviera. The school was on the Riviera. But a lot of the houses that we lived in were, you know, older houses,
Yeah.
and, you know, 4 or 5 girls would be living in one of those houses.
That's pretty far from the campus.
It was what?
Kind of far from the campus, isn't it?
No,
No, it
campus
wasn't
was
that
not
far.
in. The campus was not in Goleta.
Oh.
The
Yeah,
campus was up on the hill.
yeah.
Oh.
Here is the mission.
Yeah.
Here's the campus.
Oh, wow.
Just
Up
there
the
you
hill,
are.
Up the hill, yeah.
And then was it where Santa Barbara City College is? Is that
No,
That was part of
never
it.
that was part of it.
That was part of it.
After though, after
but you had to go all the way across town to
It was,
get to
it was
that.
across town.
yeah, yeah.
But up at the Riviera was beautiful, you know, like on some days after rain you could see all the islands and it was gorgeous.
That became the photography place.
Yeah.
Brooks Institute.
Brooks.
That closed, I think.
Yeah.
That was our campus. They moved out there just a couple of years after we left.
Yeah.
So then you came up here to work and have. I remember you telling a story about coming in off the mesa and.
Yeah. We drove to the top of the mesa and I had a flat tire.
We never been on Highway 1 for one thing.
Yeah.
We never looked down
Yeah,
and see
just
those
right down
fields,
there.
how beautiful.
Right on top of the mesa.
Yeah.
Right where the Nunes Market.
Yeah.
Nunes Market, okay. And had a flat tire. And then we came down the hill. Highway 1. Wow.
Were you late for your appointment with her?
No, I wasn't.
Oh, okay.
We fortunately left in time to. I don't remember being late for it anymore. But
And then I came up here with Momo to be interviewed by Mrs. Judkins. And Mrs. Judkins never came over to see what I was doing. She was principal. And yeah, because we had to move up to the building that's now the school, but it was brand new then because of an earthquake. And my room was way over by itself, and she never came over to see if I was doing anything.
well, she'd have had to come clear down the hill, right?
No, it was all flat up there.
Oh, okay. Was it? Oh, I see. What
Yeah,
you
but we lived just below that,
mean. Yeah.
and that was up the hill.
So was it middle school then, or no?
No,
This is
it
the
was
old-
an elementary school at
Okay.
the eighth
Yeah.
grade.
Okay.
K
No,
through
not
8.
elementary. Yeah, but yeah, it was.
K8.
Yeah, that was it. And
All these schools around here were like K8s. Except maybe Branch. I'm not sure about Branch, but you have to look that up.
but it was fairly new because when I moved up there, I made a lot of furniture out of what was then called orange crates. You know, you could make furniture.
That's what they were. They were
Yeah.
For the playhouse.
It
For
had
the
a little
playhouse,
platform
yeah.
in the middle, you know, you could make a seat out of it, or you could make this and that out of
Yeah.
it and stuff. And they came down from the office in San Luis Obispo and took pictures of my room because it was new and it had all these little things in there.
Yeah.
I was
Great seats.
impressed. And then they put it in a pamphlet that they put out. So I wonder if that's still around. I think I probably have a copy of that somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, what grade did you teach, Preston?
What?
What grade level was?
It was kindergarten.
It was kindergarten.
Yeah. See, I was a double major, music and kindergarten, early childhood education. Yeah.
And so, Grandpa, your position was what?
Music teacher.
At
Oceano.
Oceano. Which
And
was
how
also
long were you at
kindergarten.
Oceano?
Let's see. 4 years.
Yeah.
Well,
and a lot, you know, we just went to a reunion the other day, about a month ago or so, and a lot of those guys were in that class, and they're all 70, age 70 now.
Yeah, they were in the 8th grade my first year teaching.
Yeah.
Wow.
70, I bet they're 80.
No, they're 70.
Heck, we're almost 70. I'd
Or
say
70s, I mean, at least.
That was the class of
59?
Yeah, they're pushing 80.
59. Yeah, they're
That's
nearly 80.
12 years older than I
I was
am.
thinking they just said 70. Oh my God.
12 years older than me, and I'm 66.
Yeah.
So they're getting close to 80.
Yep.
Golly.
They're
That's
scaring
like
80 to death.
Shirley St. Dennis and Roger St. Dennis from that class.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe they're that old either.
Yeah.
So at that time, band was a bigger deal, right? I mean, did every K through 8 have a music teacher?
Marion Moreno was in Pismo Beach. I was in Oceano. And who was in Napomo? That was before Al Lehman, right? Al came later. That's where we wound up anyway. Al Lehman, me,
How about Pistol?
Marion.
Okay.
Marion.
Well, how about a Roy Grandy? Who was in a Roy Grandy?
Walter.
Walter Jennings. Yeah. And we all came from,
UCSB.
All came from
Music
UCSB Music Department.
Yeah.
Including George Beatty, who was doing the high school.
Wow.
yeah.
And Sam Salmons, who was also doing the high
Yeah,
school.
that's right.
Vocal director,
We'd all been
band
together.
director.
Wow.
And we went to a reunion of our music class of one person. He probably was a little bit younger, but he ended up over in Bakersfield. And I always thought, Bakersfield, oh, I can't imagine. But he actually lived in a nice place with a pond and
Who was that? Leroy Hoagie?
Shaker. Yeah, Leroy.
Leroy Hoagie.
Yeah. But I'm glad we didn't
Trombone
end
player.
up there. Yeah.
But you guys, you both were teaching at, I know the first year of teaching is not easy. So you both were teaching and mom was pregnant probably,
Yeah,
right?
I was.
Yeah.
That had to be a pretty challenging year, I would guess.
Yeah, because I had the mumps.
Yeah, he got the mumps, yeah.
I had the
Bad
mumps.
luck.
And I got them from Max Pimentel's sister.
Is that right?
Yeah. I had the, it was one of those deals where instruments suddenly crap out.
Uh-huh.
And all of a sudden she says, you know, hear what they do, they go like, it won't play. So, stupidly, I stuck it in my mouth and placed it.
Boom. Yeah.
And it wound up with the mumps.
Oh, I didn't remember that.
Yeah. Maxine's sister.
You didn't have any music education up until UCSB, and you learned it all you packed it all in there in 3 years?
That's all the official teaching and everything, or, you know, instruction.
But what about reading music and that kind of stuff?
I couldn't read my way out of a wet paper bag on a dark night when I arrived in Santa Barbara.
Wow. So you must have really hunkered down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was one of those fisher would cut bait, man.
Yeah.
You must have had some good teachers or worked hard or something. I don't know.
Yeah, they were.
But I think he really worked hard because, you know, some of the other teachers, I don't think would be able to do some of the things that Daddy's able to do, even though they went to school. No, maybe not Santa Barbara, but they, you know, had teaching credentials. And I don't know, there's just something about the way he learned. And then when he was in elementary school, he learned solfege. And that's just, it seems amazing to me that they would have that much music in the classroom, just singing songs as a group, that he would learn that.
I had that from about third grade on. Solfege. You know, well, they didn't call it that.
What is that?
Solfege.
What is it though?
Do, re, mi, fa, sol,
Oh.
la, ti, do.
Okay.
Names of the names of the notes. If you know the notes you sing, you can sing most anything.
Yeah.
We did that too at St. Mary's.
Do, a deer, a female deer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ray, a drop of golden sun. Me, a name I call myself. Fa, a long, long way to run. So, a needle holding thread. La, a note to follow so. Tea I drink with shaman bread, and that brings me back to dough. Yeah, I learned that in third grade, man. I mean, you give me a note, say this is do, and I'll sing so for you, or fa, or lo, or anything.
Yeah.
Once you know the notes you sing, you can sing most anything. But those teachers had to teach that, man. Those elementary teachers had to teach that.
But did they all? Did you just
Well, I
have a
learned it.
fantastic teacher?
Yeah,
learned
maybe
it.
you lucked out with your teacher.
Yeah, could be.
You didn't take it? Oh, we took that. And we had that. The skate would be do re, it would be the
Yeah.
thing, and she'd
Yeah.
try and do
Right.
the song, skip, you know.
Point to the note, and then you got to sing it.
Yeah.
Hey, where's do? Okay.
And the whole half step, full step, study that, how that worked. Between those. Yeah.
We got that to the next step.
And now you originally weren't on the Sandalwood house, were you? When you moved here, were in.
When we moved to this area,
Yeah,
no, we lived in Pismo Beach,
Pismo. Okay.
Just down the hill from
Judkins.
Judkins.
And then they moved over to Roy Grande.
Yeah, then we moved to Grand Avenue.
Where was Kevin?
I thought, no, there was another house
No,
you
no,
guys
no.
were into. That little
Oh,
house.
oh no! When Kevin was born, we were on Cornwall.
Cornwall.
Yeah, that's right. We're
The back end of the McDonald's parking
yeah,
lot.
McDonald's.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's a little house right there, right next to the parking lot. There was another one that was right inside the parking lot.
Oh.
Okay.
Only that parking lot was not there, just the two houses.
Yeah.
And this one was ours, and then this one's still there.
And when I got here, we did the Messiah. So a lot of people that I met were Presbyterians, and they were singing the Messiah. And Hazel Lee, that Kevin took lessons from, and lived next door to us. She later moved into town a little bit more, but she lived next door to us there on Cornwall.
And you just rented these places, right? And
Yeah,
then-
we
Yeah.
rented. And then we rented over on Grand Avenue.
Yeah.
And they started building a Williams Brothers across the street.
It's Donna's Interiors.
Yeah,
there, right
Donna's
across the
Interiors
street.
now.
It's right across the street from the furniture store.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's the name of the furniture store?
Donna's,
Donna's
Interiors.
Interiors.
Donna's Interior.
But I bumped into a friend of mine who was just on her way to see if she could find somebody to take care of her children. And I'd already met her through the Lutheran church that we were both going to. And she was looking for somebody to take care of her. She actually was going to see a particular person. I don't know who that was. And we had moved into this house on Grand Avenue. It belonged to one of the teachers up at Pismo. And I said, "Oh, let them come to me. I want my kids to have somebody to play with." And so that's how I started my daycare. Not so as much as I did in later life, but anyway, those first few days, or years, I took care of that family.
Who was that?
Kratz's.
Kratz's.
Yeah. And what made me think of that was that when they were building that, or maybe it was after I think it was while they were still building that Donna's Interiors, which was Williams Brothers.
Yeah, I can remember when they started building it.
The oldest Kratz girl,
Karen.
she was in the house, the phone rang, and I was outside, and she came through the gate in the front to tell me that the phone had rung. And I climbed over the fence and answered the phone, and that left the gate open. And Melanie went across Grand Avenue toward Williams
Oh,
Brothers.
yeah.
And she was like, how old? 2 years old,
Two,
or
I
something
think
like
it
that.
was, yeah.
And somebody brought her back, but thank goodness it wasn't the busy
It was
Grand
just like a
Avenue
two-lane
that it is
road
now.
back then.
Oh, yeah, it was 2 lanes.
Two-lane
Yeah.
road. That place I do remember.
Yeah.
It was,
Yeah.
the road was wide, or the road bed was wide, but it was only paved for 2 lanes.
Yeah.
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 So you had a bunch of dirt strips.
Yeah, and then we had Babe, and Babe would jump over the
And
fence.
we kind of fenced in the front yard, sort of, with the bushes that were out in front and some fencing down the driveway. And Babe, our old dog, could just leap over that fence, man.
Yeah, but didn't she get hit? Did she get hit by a car or almost? Because I remember there was this girl who said to you, "You better call your dog," and I think you called the dog. And did she actually get hit, or was it a real close call?
Oh, I don't remember that. No, that was one of the things that has disappeared from the
Yeah, I don't remember
Library
taking
of-
her to a vet or anything.
library of events.
But you had Babe on Sandalwood, didn't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And
so-
then after that, we would have, when we moved over there, I was probably what year was that when you guys moved to Sandalwood?
Stephanie was 50,
Let's
born
see.
in 57, and that's
That was the year.
yeah,
So I would have been like 3 or 4.
yeah.
Soon after met Mary Jane and Finney
Yeah.
and
She needed. There was one teacher there who needed somebody to watch her little girl. I mentioned that to Daddy. He can't remember her at all.
Who's that?
That's what I said. I can't remember her name. But her mother, they lived on the other side of Halcyon, on the east side of Halcyon.
Okay.
And she would,
On
Let her-
Halcyon? On Halcyon, on the east side?
yeah, or not too far from Harlow, but
Okay,
on
across the
east
street
side,
from
yeah,
Harlow?
Uh-huh. And
Okay,
the
that's-
mother, instead of coming to get her, would let her say for her to walk home.
Oh, I know who you're talking about. And she had a brother named
No,
Terry.
she didn't have any. There were no siblings at all.
They were the one I'm thinking about lived across the street from Harlow and had a son named Terry, whom I had in class.
Who was that?
Folkerts, right? No?
No,
No. Oh,
Terry. They lived right. Okay.
Because at that time I wasn't really doing it as a business. I was just doing it because they needed somebody. And then Mary Jane needed Finney, somebody for Finney. And
Okay. Halcyon Road,
yeah,
Fair Oaks Avenue,
Yeah.
Harlow.
Mm-hmm.
This little road right here in the middle of Harlow. You know the one
okay, yeah.
just
I
comes
don't
in here. and
remember
stuff.
having any.
Okay, Sam Simons lives here.
Yeah, I know where you mean.
Those people live right there on that corner. And they had a son named Terry.
Oh yeah, but I never had those kids.
I did.
Yeah. but
Isn't
I
that
did- I did.
Folkerts?
No,
They had the T-Bird, right?
no.
That house.
No.
Some house over there had a
I think
T-Bird.
they did have a T-bird.
Yeah, and there's a whole story.
That's not this house. It's on that corner right there. It's
Alright.
still there to this day.
No, it's not.
Yes, it.
Sam Simon's house is there, but not there. That house you're talking.
No, this house is gone.
Yeah.
But this road is there.
Oh yeah, the road. Yeah.
I said this road is
I thought you were talking about
Where Tommy
house.
used to live.
Tommy Martin lives
Sheriff?
over there.
Yeah.
Olive, yeah.
Yeah, Olive Street, yes.
Olive Street. That's
Oh,
it. I
that's
can never
right,
remember
yeah.
it. You're right.
But I never had any kids in that house.
No, you didn't. Well,
No.
I had Terry in class.
Yeah.
And his sister also, as I remember,
Yeah.
but
All right, go for it.
I know a little bit about a lot of things, but I don't know enough about you. You try a different line, and baby, what can I do? You don't love to go to school, and I'm nobody's fool. I used to say until I met you, I know a little bit about a lot of things, but I don't know enough about you. I'm the jack of all trades, master of none. Now isn't that a shame? I'm so sure that you'd be good for me. You just play my game, and now I've been to school, and I'm nobody's fool. I used to say till I met you, I know a little bit about a lot of things, but I don't know enough about you. I've been to school, I'm nobody's fool. That is to say, until I met you, I know a little bit about a lot of things, but I don't know enough about you. Now I know a little bit about chocolate. I know a little bit about psychology. I even know a little bit about lots of stuff, baby. But I don't know enough about you. But I don't know enough about you.
Yeah.
All right.
Sorry about it. I didn't. My brain is fading.
apologies. It sounded good.
Yeah, sounds good.
Perfect.
I thought I knew the words to that song, man.
No.
Well, sorry.
You pulled it off. We didn't
Yeah,
notice.
nobody, I didn't know you didn't know the words, so.
Is it supposed to be a lot of stuff?
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Yeah, I thought that you were faking it on that. I was like, oh, a lot of
I
stuff.
know a little bit about biology, and I know a little bit about psychology, and I even know some stuff about theology, baby. But I don't know enough about you.